This is Marlon Weems. I am the publisher and author of The Journeyman, a podcast, a newsletter. I'm also on YouTube, and I write about and talk about the intersection of politics, the economy, a little bit of finance blended in, and of course, how that all intersects with race. And I am actually supposed to have a conversation with Mr. Ernest Krim III, and we confirmed a few hours ago. So I assume that he's had a little bit of a technology hiccup. So we'll keep an eye out. Hopefully he will arrive and we can pull him in. But in the meantime, I see some familiar faces as usual. I see some new names as well. Kasim Rashid, welcome. Thanks for showing up. So in the meantime, and I've had this happen before, but as anyone who tunes into my little live streams knows, uh, I can talk. So there's plenty to talk about. One of the things I will tell you, um, and I have a habit of doing this, and those of you that are writers probably know about this as well. I tend to write about three or four different things at the same time, and whichever one gets across the finish line first is the one I publish. A lot of that depends on, I guess, how triggered I get. And I actually, there is something that has, as we say down in the South, a burr under my saddle. And maybe we can talk about this in the event that this ends up being an ask me anything instead of a back and forth. And maybe I'll invite a few of you, if you're interested to join me and we can talk about it. Um, it's the problem with allies. I'm beginning to have a problem with, and this isn't new, but people who portray themselves, and they're out there on the media and you can just pick a name, but there are some folks out there that are typically you would think of as liberals and certainly even progressive, and um, until they're not. And I don't want to spoil what I'm writing, but something I noticed earlier in the week, and it just really got me. It's, a couple of podcasters that we would consider to be on our side, let's just say. And then I noticed suddenly I'm hearing talking points about DEI and um, identity politics that I would normally expect to hear on Fox News. And so that's something that I'm really digging into. And I wonder if anybody else, maybe you can give me a heart there if this is something you've noticed or if it's all in my head. But that is something that really, um, I think we're going to start seeing a lot of it, because I'm seeing it on MSNBC and places that we think are kind of safe havens for us to engage. And I guess that's the new horse race or something, because we don't have an imminent election. So it's now, there he is, Mr. Krim. I will pick you up as soon as I figure out how to do it. And there we are. Hopefully, Mr. Krim can jump in and we can get going. There he is.
Hey, I'm sorry, man.
No,
Sorry
no
about my
worries. No
tardiness.
worries. Let me ask you, is this your first live stream?
Yes, my first one on Substack. Yep.
No, no worries, man. It's a little different, but
Yes.
welcome. And I'll tell you, I have been one of the things I have tried to do with this platform since they enabled, where we can all do live streams. And this is really something that I've been on Substack for. I started my newsletter 5 years ago,
Hmm.
and back then there was not a lot of diversity in terms of people
Yeah.
who are on Substack. And
Yep.
even when they started to do live streams and they introduced notes, not a lot of black folks, not a
Hmm.
lot of non-white folks, which nothing against white folks, they're cool too, but it was noticeable to me really this year. And I wonder if it's something to do with people maybe sort of hedging a little bit because of TikTok and what was going on
Yeah.
there. So, what I've tried to do, just as somebody who's kind of been here for a minute, and I don't have a huge following, but it's not nothing. And so I thought it was important for me at least to do my part to kind of introduce other folks that people may not know. And so I started following you a couple of months ago, I guess. And, you know, just to give people some background, Mr. Krim is an author.
Mhm.
I have seen some of your talks with young people. Now, you're out of Chicago, right?
Yeah, Chicago area. Yep.
Why don't you just kind of give,
Yep.
just for the audience, just a little bit of a rundown of your bio and your background?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on here. Because, like you said, this is a new platform for me. I've been on those Instagram and TikTok streets for a while. And it's kind of to your point. I think after the first scare of TikTok potentially being banned, I began to see a lot of fellow creators who make similar content. They would post things on Instagram that highlighted articles they wrote here. And I was always kind of intrigued by that. And I didn't even realize at the same time I was subscribed to a few Substacks from different writers I enjoy. I think for me, after releasing my book, though, in March of this year, a couple months ago, How Black History Can Save Your Life, I got the bug to write again because I wrote that book really 95% of it was written between 2017 and 2018. I first released it in 2020 and then I did some updates in 2024 to it, but I hadn't sat down to write in that same manner in a long time. And after I put it out, I said, this is the thing that gave me a lot of peace and helped me heal through the basis of my book, which was written through trying to heal from a hate crime. So I said, I got to buckle down and start doing it again because it just helps me, like, as you know, like bring things together and collect my thoughts. For those of you who aren't aware, I am a public teacher, a former classroom teacher of 12 years who taught U.S. history through a black historical lens in the Chicago area. I was driven to do this work primarily, Marlon, because growing up on the South Side, I had a lot of questions about why things were different in my neighborhood than the other neighborhoods in Chicago. And that was heightened when I was bused to a white neighborhood to go to school in the 90s. So a lot of folks think of desegregation as something that happened in the 50s and 60s, but I was a part of desegregation in the 90s. The schools in my neighborhood weren't really funded well. They didn't have a lot of resources. So I began to see different things. I began to ask my parents questions, and my parents always either had a response that was inspiring or they steered me in the direction of how to learn more about it. I had no idea that I would want to do black history or even be a teacher at that point, but my mom was a teacher and I think that greatly influenced me. I went to college, almost flunked out, and just so happened to say, let me take a black history course because I never had that chance before. And if I'm not back here the next semester, at least I can say I learned a little about myself. And that was January of 2006, and I have not stopped studying and teaching my history since then. A light bulb went off. It was, just this paradigm shifting moment for me where I was able to learn about myself for the first time, where we were the center of the story. And I was driven to tell as many people as possible about the things I learned because to me it connected the dots. It helped me understand that our predicament was one that was by design in this country. And I think prior to understanding black history, when you get headlines in the news in this country, you get caught up in victim blaming, and you begin to think things and say things like, "Well, we should just do better, or we should just do this, or we should just do that." But if you start your history with the year you were born, or if you start your history with a headline, you miss out on all the intricate ways in which they have constantly fought to disenfranchise us. Even if we start where I was born in the 80s, we talking about the war on drugs and the CIA intentionally putting cocaine and crack in our communities to re-enslave us. That's a huge part of our situation right now that that our communities have not recovered from. So when I graduated from college, I began to teach with that same mindset of me being able to use this information in a transformative way to help, as Carter G. Woodson, re-educate the miseducation. 6 years into teaching, I then dealt with a hate crime. I was caught in the mix of the rise of Trump, and my wife and I dealt with this hate crime, and I just so happened to record it. And I used it as a way to fight for justice. And that was my first piece of content, July of 2016, to get this person's information to help get her arrested. And in the midst of that, I wrote because I had a breakdown on the way to work one day, March of the following year. And again, going back to why I joined Substack, writing about my experiences leading up to that hate crime helped me release some of it. I had all this pent up frustration and all this other stuff, and I was able to get it out. And that's where the title comes from, how Black history can save your life. It helped me when I dealt with the hate crime. It helped me maintain my sanity, and it helped me make sense of the condition I was in Chicago. And since then, I've just been driven to educate and give this information out to as many people as possible on any medium possible. So thanks for having me again.
That's very interesting. Um, it's especially what you said about why it is you write, because I have said before, um, for me, there's a certain therapeutic aspect to it.
Yeah.
Even just when you popped in, I was talking about something that kind of triggered me. I woke up, and I wonder if it's, sometimes it's a confluence of different things. And this, it wasn't anything monumental, but it happened. I believe it was the fifth anniversary of George Floyd's murder.
Mm,
And one of the things that made me remember, and I don't know if you ever seen this show, it's canceled now, but Jon Stewart used to have this show on Apple TV. And it was
I've heard
called
of it.
the Problem with Jon
Mhm.
Stewart. And every
Yeah.
week he'd tackle a different problem, right?
Mhm.
And I like Jon Stewart. He
Yeah.
seems like his heart's in the right place. There was an episode though that I didn't actually see it on the show. I ran across it on YouTube, and it was from a particular episode that was talking about racism.
Mm,
And so it was the problem with white people. And I won't go into the whole thing, but um, this was a couple of years after um, George Floyd, and he was talking about the media's reaction and politicians' reaction to George
mhm,
Floyd of surprise. Like they
mm.
just had
Yeah.
no idea
Mhm.
there was this much racism going on, and they just couldn't believe it. And
Yeah.
boy, can't believe black people this mad, and can't believe
Yeah.
all these protesters, and it's just
Yeah.
like it slipped up on them, right?
Yeah.
So I ran across a video, and this was from a MSNBC program, and they got the panel, and there's this young guy, and all of a sudden he starts talking about, he first of all, he's just saying things that you might hear AOC or Jasmine
Mhm.
Crockett, or not just black folks, but some of the younger people close in the same age to this guy. He's Gen Z guy.
Mhm.
And Katie Turak, like, it was the first time she'd ever heard any Democrat say these things.
Mhm.
And it just blew me away, because I
Yeah.
said, so what are they trying to do? It's almost like, until this white guy said it,
Mhm. Yeah.
nobody said
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
it.
Yep.
and I, and
Ain't that the
I
truth?
have been, I feel sorry for my family, because I have been beating this horse for 3 days. As
Yeah.
I'm writing this, I get mad again, and
Yep.
I'll
Yep.
stop, and then I'll go back, and I'll write some more, and I'll get mad
Yep.
again. But it's almost, it is a certain therapeutic aspect to it, as opposed to holding it in and walking
Yeah.
around mad.
Yeah. It's to me, it's like we have this multitude of thoughts throughout the day. And oftentimes, too, I know for me, now that I work for myself, it's like if I have a bright idea about something that is intertwined with my business, I have a note section on my phone. I have to put it down because I don't know if I'll go back to that moment. And what writing does for me is it allows us to extrapolate those ideas. So you have that grand idea, that epiphany. And now I can sit down and organize these thoughts that, for me, it's a spiritual thing. We're pulling it from the metaphysical. I'm putting this down on paper, and it's not just something that's fleeting now. This is what it is, and that's how I even feel about my book because for a lot of folks, when you write, especially when you get in that flow state of writing, it's hard to kind of explain just the vibe you're in. It's almost like that runner's high. I don't do a lot of running, but the times I have, I think the most I've probably done is like 6 miles. And I can recall running and you get to a certain mileage where you're like, dang, okay, this feels good. you just
Yeah.
but if you stop or just turn a little bit, you might kind of mess it up. That's what writing my book did for me. It was like every night when my kids, my wife was asleep, I'm writing. Or I was sometimes putting it in my phone because it was like I might not have an audience of people all in one spot that want to hear me talk about this right now, but if I can put all of this on text and in paper, I can give it out to them in separate moments so they could at least have a piece of what not just what I thought, but how I connected it to broader things of history. And to your point too, of like, sometimes white folks only really digesting it when it comes from people who look like them. I felt like people only cared about the racism that they saw that me and my wife dealt with because it was visible. It was involved the N word. It involved spit, and nobody wants to see those two things connected. But I felt like I had to be able to explain to people, not just them, but our own community, that racism is way deeper than that. And in fact, the N word is the tip of the iceberg. Like we deal with the systems, the systemic impact, the underfunded schools, the lack of healthcare access, the food apartheid, the low life expectancies because of how all these systems work together, the over policing. And I needed people to see how that impacted me on a personal level throughout my life. So I even talk about this. I started at the age of 6, but I could have started in 87 when I was born. My mom would always tell me how she was campaigning for Harold Washington. Like that's still a big deal. He was the first black mayor in Chicago. Like and what he had to push for, what he had to deal with again in the midst of the 80s and what we again are still recovering from in our neighborhoods. So without having that vehicle to write, especially in our community when it was at one point illegal for us to read and write, like that is a vessel of freedom. When I read Fred when I so the one of the first books I bought when I was in college, outside of the ones I was mandated to buy, was Frederick Douglass' autobiography, the first one. Now that book was proud, I think 1840, 1850. That book had like one of the outside of probably Malcolm X's book was the single most impactful book I've ever read. And that was 160 years after he put it out. 150, 160 years. So like, for me, that's what it is. Like there's somebody who could come across our writing that we have no idea will exist. And we can give them a piece of what life was like now that can help them make sense of what life will be like then. And I don't know if Frederick Douglass intended to do that when he wrote his story, or even Malcolm X 60 years ago, but he did. And I think what we do now, especially with the way social media is now, when everything is quick videos and sliding through, like Substack and writing these articles forces people to sit still and be with the writer in some ways in the conversation to kind of really see what they think about and how they feel and how we can use that information progressively.
One of the things, and I guess we all, it's so interesting that you mentioned kind of your process because mine is similar. Um, when I have a thought, though, a lot of times I will start writing something in notes and I have to stop because I realize, wait a minute, this is 150 words. I need to pull this out and sit it over here in my draft and kind
Yeah.
of flesh it out a little bit.
Yeah. Yep.
And I do a lot of my writing at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
You know,
I
I
get
used to
that.
I used to work in New York, so I am still kind of in that. Just biologically, my clock is set to like 4 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah. Yeah.
whether I like it or not. And
Yep.
so, but it's quiet. There's not really much going moving around but me, and that is when you just have that. At least I do. I have that clarity,
Yep. Same.
right? That I
Yeah.
just have these thoughts, and I have to put it down, even if I don't finish, because I'll lose it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And of course,
Yep.
that's how you end up with almost 100 drafts.
Right.
But a lot of times I'll just have an idea and I write it down and I don't know where I'm going with it exactly. And as a matter of fact, this example I just gave, I noticed this about a year ago from one of the people that I'm going to get into, and I just said, "Boy, I'm not." Maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe he just kind of wasn't framing it right. And it was
Yeah.
about DEI, right?
Yeah.
And the whole narrative that um, white men are being
Yeah.
discriminated against
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
right? And I'm kind of a data nerd too, so I really wanted to just take my time and let it percolate a little bit before.
Mhm.
And so now I'm ready. So I want to ask you
Yep.
about your book
Mhm.
because the title is what jumped out, and I know you explained. Um,
Yeah.
I saw a few videos where are you going around to like high schools talking to kids, and
Yeah.
what's the reception that you're getting?
Man, so I started speaking a few months after I dealt with the hate crime and it became a public thing. I had some close friends that I either did some work with or went to grad school with that asked me to share my story. So by 2017, I started going to different schools, taking off work to share. And it's always been positive. I've always been a person who took a lot of pride in teaching as an art. So my students could tell, even if they didn't like history, they went away having a profound amount of respect for me and liking my class because they knew I genuinely cared about them and I loved what I did. Like when I look back now with somebody who travels a lot to speak, I was essentially I taught two different subjects 5 times a day total. I was essentially speaking 5 times a day. You know, for anybody who's ever done public speaking, you understand the toll that takes on you. Like, right? I never understood how a teacher could every day just give kids worksheets and sit down and just say, do your work and, let the bell ring. I wanted to, like, for me, it was, I got you for 9 months, an hour a day. I got to do something over the course of this 9 months to help you understand how the system wants to use you, regardless of your skin color. The system wants to use you, whether it's a racial thing, a class thing. And I have to light that spark. It's like Tupac said, I might not change the world, but I want to spark the brain. I want to spark something in you. So when I began to speak, it was easy because I had to lesson plan every day for from August to the end of May. Right? When I'm speaking, that was like, oh, I just gotta have one lesson plan. And I got that's it, right?
So
And
I
I
tell
gotta
you
do
what, man, I do some guest lecturing from time
yeah,
to time, and the one of the first ones that I did was two classes back to back. And man, it wore me
man,
down. I mean, because
man,
this was on a college campus, and
yeah,
so I don't know, maybe 75 kids, and you got big screen and a
yeah,
PowerPoint and all of that stuff.
yeah,
And I thought, oh, just an hour. That's not that bad.
yeah.
But 2 hours.
Oh man.
The next morning, man, my throat
Right,
was sore. I
right.
was all raspy, and I did learn you got to be drinking a whole lot of water.
Whole lot of water. You got to make sure you fed too, man. Because
Yeah.
like now, by the time you finish speaking, it feels like you did an aerobic workout or something. So like when I go to, it's funny because I have a sizable platform on Instagram, TikTok, and other platforms like that. But when I go speak somewhere, a lot of the additional speaking I get comes from the people who saw me there.
Hmm.
Because it's still something that even if you like a video, when you see somebody in person, you can feel the energy more. So it's always been very positive, man. I've always been very humble, but also too, like I feel like teaching, again, the unsung heroes of our country. As someone who did it for 12 years, and my wife has been teaching for 17 years. When I met her, she knew she wanted to teach, and she still loves it as if she'd been teaching in her first year. It is an exhausting but very rewarding career. And if you can master the art, because it truly is an art if you take it serious, the art of teaching, If you can master that, and I did high school. Now imagine middle school. You know, imagine the case. Like, and it's crazy because in education they get paid the less amount of money the younger the kids are, but the kids are more demanding the younger they get, right? But like if you can master that, I think you can do any career because now as an entrepreneur all the different things I have to pull from go back to the lesson planning, the grading papers, the interacting with kids, interacting with parents. I was everything, man. I was a teacher, social worker, psychologist. You know, I had a kid have a seizure in class. I was a paramedic before. Like I all of these things come from that experience. So when you transfer that to speaking, it's easier in comparison, in my opinion.
I can imagine. I put it this way: I know how teachers had to deal with me, so we'll just leave it there. So, one of the things that drew me to your spot on Substack was some of the historical posts, and I'm kind of a history buff. You hit me with something today that I have to admit I did not know, and
Yeah.
it was regarding Cassius Clay's
Yeah.
name. I
Yeah.
just assumed it was some sort of Roman,
Yeah.
Cassius Marcellus Clay. Sound like
Yeah.
maybe some Julius Caesar kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
you have to tell that story because I actually watched that video a couple of times because I was like, wait a minute, how did I not know this?
Man, yeah, again, I'll backtrack by saying, um, that a great teacher will inspire you to want to continue to learn more of what you probably don't know, of what you realize you don't know. And I had a great teacher, Dr. Abdul Al Kamat, when I was in college, who still inspires me to this day. Um, and I say that because when I started teaching, a lot of the information I began to teach my students came from new information I was learning because I'm still a student. I can't even tell you how I came across them, but it may have been when I was looking up something for Muhammad Ali, honestly. Sometime in the last decade in the 2010s, I'm Googling some stuff about Muhammad Ali because I would always show the kids what he said about Vietnam and things like that. And
Right.
I think I probably saw a video of some sort where it was a white guy, and I was like, who's this white guy with Muhammad Ali? Because like you said, like we grow up hearing the tale of like he got rid of his name, he joined the nation, he didn't want to be named after a white dude. And I get that, right? But I had no idea that the white dude he was named after was actually a white dude that a good person to be
Yeah.
named after. Cassius Marcellus Clay was this huge white dude who probably would have been a linebacker if he was around today, born in Kentucky. Um, Same place, where Muhammad Ali was from. And he grew up with a family that enslaved black people. So that's what he thought was the standard for society. He went to Yale University and he heard William Lloyd Garrison speak. And I think that's so powerful right there as a breaking point because it speaks to the power of exposure. For one, also to him being willing to hear someone who had a different perspective. Oftentimes nowadays, you got people who will go to someone's lecture who they disagree with only to boo them or to ridicule them.
Disrupt. Exactly.
Right, not to genuinely hear a different perspective. And I would like relate that to somebody who's probably now you might know some folks who are growing up within this MAGA environment. They need to hear that different perspective. So he heard William Lloyd Garrison speak and he did a complete 180. His whole life changed. And by the time he's in his mid 20s, now he inherits enslaved black people and he lets them go. He manumits them. And I think they said it was about 40. So that would translate
Right.
to over $1 million. Like nobody could like a lot of folks say, like, yeah, I'm down for the cause. Yeah, I'm not racist. Yeah, but like, are you willing to give up something that's worth $1 million? And let's even sit with the fact that we're still talking about people, which is still mind-boggling. But let's like, would somebody give up their fortune they inherited to free somebody or to help someone? So that's what he did. And then he ran for office. And he started a newspaper that was based on abolitionism in Kentucky, and he became public enemy number one. For a lot of white folks, they I think they should be angry that they have been kept in the dark about radical people like this. And when I speak to audiences who are majority white, I always tell them that it's not just if you are struggling to name five of your people or who look like you, same ancestry, think about the thousands more you don't know. So we're talking over the course of American history, millions of people. We're talking thousands of people. That's even a small percentage. that have stood up, said something, did something on a small level that you don't know about, that you've been kept in the dark about intentionally, because if you are able to imagine yourself as that person, then you begin to move differently. The same way I was inspired when I was imagining myself as a Frederick Douglass when I read his book, or a Malcolm X. This is why they try to ban our history so much. They
Well,
know
that's
that
one of the things that gets me is the whole idea that we can't talk about these things
right, right.
because they'll make white kids feel bad. When the reality, and I think to your point, is all the white folks weren't, they weren't all villains. There were guys like Cassius Marcellus Clay
Yep,
that were on the right side of history.
yep.
And to me, there's no reason for you to feel bad
That
if you know that part.
that lets you know two things. One, the limits of how they've been taught about who they are as European people, but also two, the fact that they would rather identify with that social construct of whiteness,
Mm.
because we know the social construct of whiteness was created to subjugate and to be within its caste system. But they would much rather identify with the George Washington than there's a white dude, Warner Mifflin, in the late 1700s around the American Revolutionary War, who was advocating for reparations. Right? They would rather you identify with the enslaver than the white folks who said it's wrong. There were Quakers in the 1600s
Yep.
who were fighting against slavery. We know that not all the Quakers were on the right side, but the ones that were. We don't learn about those folks, right? And so I began to think about this deeply because I taught most of my career in a diverse school. And I remember one year thinking, like, man, I really, of course, want to make sure my Black and Latino kids see themselves positively. But I said, but my white kids love my class too. But also, how do they feel in their seats, having probably never seen somebody who looks like them fight against slavery? So I said I got to be able to find some examples too. So they not that they can, not so they could deny the reality of what people who look like them did, but so that they could also see that this was a
Well, it was a
humanity.
monolithic, in other
Yeah, it was a
words.
monolithic. This was a human rights thing. And there were a variety of people who fought on this side. But those majority of people didn't always have the access to the military might and power for it to be sustained. So when you learned about Cassius Marcellus Clay, not even just the stances he took, he literally fought people. He dueled with
I
people.
know.
He he
That's the
chopped up
part of the
people.
video that
Yeah.
really blew me away because I expected when the narrator started talking about basically how folks were putting hits out on this guy. I expected it to be okay. He got assassinated and so on.
Yeah, yeah.
So it
Yeah,
didn't
right,
really
right.
go that way though.
He lived a nice long life, and I mean that's the type of guy, like, I want to see that narrative included in more stories, right? I mean, I think we most often learned about like a John Brown, and we're often told that a John Brown is crazy for what he wanted to do. But what if we know that there are more people like John Brown from that time period, like a Cassius Clay? And it changes how we view these things. History has most often been used as a tool of mental oppression for us all to keep the status quo. It's baseline propaganda for our country. Like, everybody has to go to school, but not everybody might watch the propaganda on TV or on the phone. But all the kids have to go, so we got to make sure this narrative is a certain way, so that the ways they're trying to disenfranchise us on a federal level seem normative and okay.
Well, it's one of these things, and I guess just to circle back as we close out on just the fifth anniversary of the George Floyd murder, subsequent protests. It is so interesting to me when you think about the broad reaction across the country of, you know, changing Uncle Ben's name and changing Aunt Jemima syrup and all these things. And now here we are 5 years later,
Yeah.
and it's almost a backlash within a backlash, if you
Yep.
think about it. And I mean that by the backlash that we saw to Obama, and
Hmm.
now there's this inside of that backlash.
Yep.
You got this backlash to George Floyd,
Yep.
anti DEI, anti ESG, all these things.
Yeah.
I wonder what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I spoke to ABC 7 here in Chicago about this last week, and a lot of I don't think on a systemic level, of course, I don't think we've seen much reform. I think the change that I've noticed and seen has been really on the grassroots level by the people in our community. I think that we have doubled down on what it means to support our businesses. I don't think we see that support for, boycotting Target, for instance, without having seen the unity that came from such an unfortunate situation where his brother was lynched on camera. I think I've seen an increase in us trying to find ways to heal. That was something that was really big for me during that time period. While I was teaching virtually during the pandemic, during the Black Lives Matter movement, I took all the extra time I had in between teaching my students virtually to focus on healing too, meditating more, reading from phenomenal authors and therapists like Resma Menakem, for example. So I don't think that's something that's going to change from our community. But I think that we've also learned that what a lot of corporations will do is they'll just latch on to whatever's popular at the moment. We, like, again, going back to Target, that's the greatest example of that. As a place that was headquartered where that murder happened, to a place who pledged this money and had a lot of black owned businesses, and became a place where we say, you know what, even if I'm gonna spend more money, I'm gonna go here and not the other places. To then see them do a complete 180 when another president comes in. I think we learned a lot of valuable lessons, and I think we have to take away the positive of understanding what we're truly dealing with now and not be deceived. That was the largest total civil rights demonstration we've seen. And for that to not lead to tangible resources or a complete overhauling of
Police
our
reform,
systems. Yeah,
just
like just
basic stuff.
basic, basic. Like, and to see even affirmative action, all these things be overturned. It lets us know that, yeah, okay, if we want true change, then we have to buckle down on the grassroots level and really look at what that means for us to support each other. Um, and I think too, just even as a social media content creator, one of the things I've noticed too is going back to history is the narrative that some people really believe, or their hate has taken a hold of them to such a degree that they are making themselves believe it. But people are really in my comments talking about that he died of an overdose. That has become a commonly, like, if I didn't see this 5 years ago.
Seriously?
Seriously, I in the post that was the ABC 7 post, there are most of the comments are negative. When you look at even ABC 7 Chicago on the Facebook account when they posted the video that we did, most of the comments are negative. People feel more emboldened now because I think it's like, well, look, it's like when you have a sub, oh, the sub not enforcing the rules, the sub don't know what goes on around the school. Well, I'm gonna do what I want to do. They know on that level, the federal level, they have somebody who supports that, and sometimes says it directly, sometimes he infers it, but they know they support that. We have been inundated with misinformation, disinformation, overall stupidity. People really want to believe that that person deserved it, that George, like, so I think that for me it just gives me a sense of clarity, though, to understand that, yeah, I'll never be deceived in that manner again. And I can only move forward and organize with people who are truly concerned. And that's most often shown through action, like Cassius Marcellus Clay, who manumitted those black folks.
It's one of those things. I was telling someone the other day that I have gotten to the place that I'd much rather have the person who's overtly racist at least put it out there so I know,
Exactly.
as opposed to the ally over here that may have,
Right.
if not purely racist beliefs, what you run into sometimes, and it's like MLK made the comment about
Mhm.
the moderate white person,
Mhm.
saying, well, bide your time, wait,
Yep.
don't protest, it'll
Yep.
get better, and all these
Yeah.
half
Yeah.
measures. And
Yep.
so I think if there's any silver lining, at least we know who's who.
Exactly. I think that's it, man. I think that if we can't, for something that has been an issue in our community for hundreds of years, and that's police violence, for something that we spent, like, in 2020, for many of us, we have been seeing those videos for a decade, over a decade. if that couldn't be the thing that pushed us, if this president, like it's crazy when you think about it, America moved further to the right following that public lynching.
Yeah.
Right? Like we saw all of that. We saw everybody put their screen, in black, and we saw everybody hashtagging Black Lives Matter,
All the performative stuff.
all the performative stuff. Like we saw politicians kneeling with kente cloth.
You had to bring that up, Ernest. That was really, to me, the low right there. That was the
I
low.
hate that it's still an image in my head, man. Like I just
But as we kind of close out, I think a few things, folks. Number one, I'm going to circulate the recording of this. It may take me a few days. I'm still catching up, um, but I always try to. I'll put information on your book. Make sure everybody knows.
thank you.
We can get a few links out there. Also, if you are able to subscribe, please do. If you're able to become a paid subscriber, please consider it because folks like Mr. Krim, obviously, we need the support to keep this thing going.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Man, it's great to talk with you. We got to do this again.
Oh, definitely, man. It's been a great conversation. I think we got a lot of nuggets in there in about
Yeah, we
40
did. We
minutes,
hit a lot of them.
Yeah.
And I'm curious. Do you have another book in the hopper? Are you working on anything?
So, for those who just kind of became aware of me, I do have a children's book called The ABCs of Affirming Black Children. It's a children's book, but I call it a family book because I believe that, for one, I use very rich language because I want to increase our kids' vocabulary, but also, too, I think through that, everybody can read that and learn something. I'm writing. I think I'm at a stage now where if I were a recording artist, I would just be like, I'm in the studio recording a bunch of songs to see what
Yeah.
sticks. I'm with the publisher now, which is different from me from like when I first put the first edition out. So it also depends on what they think, as well. So, but I am working. I am working. I'm moving more towards writing as opposed to being in a constant grind of creating 60-second videos every day. So yes.
I'm you know what, man? I have a 22-year-old daughter and a 19-year-old son,
Mhm.
and that's when I need something like that, I just look at them
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I'm too old to learn too much new stuff.
yeah. I
But
feel you.
seriously though, maybe you can hook me up with your publisher. I'm actually working on a
Yeah.
memoir because I started the first black-owned investment firm in Arkansas. So
Right.
I'm
Right.
writing about that, and it's so interesting as you talk about just the through line
Yeah.
of how we got Frederick Douglass almost 200 years ago saying the
Yeah.
same things that
Yeah.
the same issues that you
Yeah.
dealt with. And I'm sitting here listening to you thinking, well, I went to segregated schools until I was a teenager. you
Man.
know so
Yeah.
it's it's a lot, and it's
Yeah.
persistent, I guess, is the thing that
Yeah.
we have to keep in mind. But anyway, man, it's a pleasure, and
Pleasure.
I will definitely be looking for your next story. So the next thing you can wake me up on after talking to Clay, man, because that was one I just said, oh my gosh, I got to talk about this.
Yeah, thanks, man. Well, I appreciate you inviting me on your platform too, man. And I look forward to having another conversation with you soon.
Absolutely. Till next time, folks, we'll see you on the other side. Take care.
Peace.